Welcome to the Photography Pod, a show for both working professionals and enthusiast photographers alike. And here's your hosts, Steve Vaughan and Nick Church.
Hello again, welcome back to the Photography Pod. My name's Steve.
And my name's Nick Church.
So how you doing, Nick? How's your week been?
Very good. Yeah, very busy though, but brilliant. Yeah, bit of a variety of stuff. I had, last week, back in last week, I was shooting a load of cider and sparkling wine from a local producer near here.
And you didn't invite your mate Steve to come down and help you photograph it and drink it?
Because I needed the products left for the shoot. So not have empty bottles. I mean, I could have just photoshopped the liquid back in. But that was good. I did crack open a couple of them because you have to have some with, you know, in glasses naturally. So yeah, so there's no point sending those back. It was lovely. Yeah, really good. So that was good. At the weekend, very busy because another photographer, I was shooting weddings, another photographer had a code 6 on the stomach problem. So there was no way he was going to be able to make it. He was really unwell. So like the night before, I was chatting to him and stepped in to do that one. So
good for you,
that was down in Devon. I thought, well, you know, it is such a, we talked about this before, but in our old lives of kind of political, you know, backstabbing kind of corporate life, having a community of photographers that are pretty collaborative and help each other out is great. Plus, you never know when you're going to need it yourself. So,
exactly.
So that was good. Yeah. So I squeezed that one in, managed to placate dawn with, because it was one of my rare Saturdays off. But yeah, I think I'll probably escape with a few minor flesh wounds. Yeah. And then yesterday, I went down the day before down to Cornwall to shoot a wedding at Lost Gardens of Heligan, which was absolutely beautiful. I've never been there before, even as a visitor. So it was, fascinating. That was a really lovely day as well. So yeah, really good. Yeah, varied and fun.
Sounds like it. Yeah. We're talking about community of photographers. I went on a flash workshop last week. So I'm in a community called Flash Masters. I feel a bit of a fraud in there because I'm not a Flash Master by any means. It's run by a great guy called Neil Redfern and his partner Helen Williams, and you know, hopefully they're going to be on the pod in the future.
Yeah.
I had this guy over called Christian Cardona, who's a Colombian wedding photographer, and we went up to Manchester, and we're in a Revolution de Cuba restaurant and bar, and we're in the basement. He's got like this area where they have events and functions and things, and there was about 20 of us there, all from all over the country. And it was absolutely ace. I come back buzzing from it. You know, when you throw yourself out your comfort zone and you think, you know, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I'm going to go for it. It was really, really, really good fun. His imagery is off the scale.
I saw some of the shots you sent over. Incredible. Fantastic. Inspirational stuff, yeah.
You know, you one stage, you got 26 flash guns going on an image. We had a model come in and a partner and you know, his ability just to see reflections and to balance it with gels and things. It was just amazing. I met a lot of great other photographers who hopefully are going to follow the podcast now as well.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And you know, when you need that sort of creative kick up the arse sometimes, that was exactly what it was for me, really. You know, come away out of my comfort zone and try something a bit different. So at the weekend on Saturday, I was photographing through wine glasses and putting gels around flashes and all this kind of stuff. So we'll see what it looks like at the end.
So that was 26 separate flashes from different people, not like a 26 light setup.
No, 26 light setup.
Because you often, you know, often when I'm doing 25 light setups, I think what this needs is one more light, you know.
He actually had 26 flash guns firing in different groups, you know, firing up, firing down. He set himself a challenge basically of how many flashes could he get into one particular image, and he managed it. Incredible. But
you're absolutely right. I think getting yourself into doing something completely different really gets you out of that comfort zone and just
absolutely
recharges the creative batteries, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. Talking of recharging batteries, I managed to kill a camera at the weekend as well. Our Sony A7R4 died.
Oh dear.
And I think it's the shutter gun, which is a bit annoying because he's supposed to do it to 400,000. He's done about 120, but it's off to Sony Cardiff as we speak, and they'll find out what's wrong with it. So
it's always a pain, isn't it? Because mine, as I said last time, mine's playing up. The shutter sounds odd sometimes, and I think that's probably not a great thing. Plus, the lens communication is not reliable, but I just can't do without it for the next couple of months, you know. So it's going to have to wait. I mean,
thankfully we've got a backup, so we're going to be okay for Saturday's wedding. So anyway, we've got a third person on the video right now or on the stream. So without going any further, we should introduce our first guest in our new series, Nick. And he's somebody that you know better than I do. So I'm going to hand over to you and let you introduce our guest today.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have Guy Peterson with us today. I met Guy at the end of his Falmouth University degree course.
Yeah.
There's a presentation, so I met him there, and really interesting to chat then. Guy is a photojournalist based in Dakar. He studied, marine and
natural history photography. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
At Falmouth.
Wow.
So his work focuses on documenting the politics and humanitarian crises and conflict in some of the toughest places on the planet. So, really fascinating person to have on. So, thanks for coming in, Guy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great. I enjoyed the introduction. You just guys chatting about broken cameras and code 6s. I definitely can relate to that. Having cameras die the night before and everything else. That's cool. No, thank you so much for having me here. It's cool.
And you're not in Senegal at the moment.
No, I'm actually going back on Sunday. No, I'm in Italy at the moment, which is nice. Just having a bit of a break. Last week I was in France, where there's a great photojournalism conference actually that goes on for about 2 weeks in Perpignan. The first week is like a pro week. And so you've got all of the editors from all of the magazines and newspapers, all these photographers, everyone sort of goes for a week, and every single night there's an amazing 2-hour projection of everyone's work. Huge exhibitions everywhere. It's a really inspiring, really, really cool place to be and network and just meet everyone. It's the one place actually that I get to meet the editors I worked with for last year or 2 years or 3 years, photographers, just catch up with everyone because everyone's so nomadic and mobile that having everyone in one place is sometimes pretty tricky. So it's the one place that you really get to see everyone, which is really cool. So just came back from that here, and then going back to Dakar on Sunday, and then on Tuesday I'm going to Cameroon for 10 days to do a story on the conflict there. I think it's going to be through the eyes of people having relationships where there's a conflict between the Anglophone region and the Francophone region, and these relationships are between couples. One of them's from the Anglophone region and one of them's from the Francophone region, and how that works and how they've experienced this conflict through that. And then another one on the largest frog in the world, which is in Cameroon, which should be super cool. And the conservation efforts there. Oh, wow. So it'll be a cool few weeks. And then back to Dakar, and then 2 days later doing it'll be cool. And then doing a demining thing. Yeah, it'll be jumping back in. You caught me on the tail end of my summer.
So when you're on holiday, are you good? It sounds like you're good at continuing photography and just doing other stuff and keeping, I know Steve's good at taking photos on holiday. I'm terrible. I'm absolutely terrible. I just can't be bothered on holiday.
It's on holiday. Maybe that's on holiday. Well, my holiday is going back to England. So I was at Glastonbury this year. I'd take my camera and just shoot every single day, all sorts of things. I love that.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Also, maybe you hate it. Every wedding I go to, I also take photos. But obviously I'm not getting paid, but I just enjoy it. So it's fun. Family, Christmas, birthdays, everything. Yeah. So
Guy, talk us, going back in time a bit, from when I met you at the end of your university degree. What's been your journey from there to your where you are now? Things you just talked about.
It's been a lot. So at the end of university, I was photographing a lot of music festivals, and that's what I did throughout, especially in the summer. I do like 10 or 12 music festivals, photographing for their marketing teams, and that was my first professional experience photographing stuff, events, dealing with schedules and sort of tight pressure. Having to file on the spot and everything else, which is really great training actually for what I do now. But then I really did want to be traveling and be a photojournalist, but I wasn't sure that that's exactly what I want to do. So I got a job at a factory and worked at a factory actually for 6 months to save money. Then went to Morocco, did a French language course, and then traveled from Morocco on the way to Sierra Leone for about 5 months, except that the trip never actually finished because then it was February 2020. And COVID happened, and I was in Senegal, and lockdown happened there. So I actually had to fly back to the UK. And obviously, as you did, you guys, no weddings, no photography. So actually, I was a graphic designer for a year and a half at an internet company, and I was still able to shoot some stuff and designed their website. We did a whole rebrand. I designed their cars. It was a great experience. but it managed to, I could save some money. And then a year and a half later, once everything had died down a bit, I moved to Senegal, and sort of just moved and hoped that it would work out. I didn't really have any contacts there. I'd never done any photojournalism stuff, but I just networked, and there was the Gambia election coming up. So I talked to the editor at AFP in Dakar, and he was like, "Oh, go shoot for me." It's incredible, Agence France Presse, a massive agency, and to be able to shoot for them is a real big step up. And I went down by myself. I was the first one there, and was shooting. And within the first day, you file your images, and the next morning, it's everywhere. Al Jazeera, BBC, The Guardian, anyone that's writing a story about this election, your pictures that you created the day before are there. And that was really amazing, and a really great introduction to that. And the exposure was really, really good. So then I networked with a few other journalists who were also there and in Senegal. And that sort of one thing led to the other, which led to the next story, which led to the next one. And for the first year and a half, I really was just learning. I never knew how to pitch. I didn't study journalism or anything like that. What made a good story? What if I wanted to photograph something? Would it actually make a good story, or is it just meant to take photos? Sure. And how to curate that? What did editors look for, and how to approach them? How to convince them that this is something that they wanted? Knowing what publications, different publications want different things, even if it's a simpler story. So finding that out. I had a few friends that were journalists who were there, who I lived with. So we just sat down every single day at the dining room table that we had at this little flat in Dakar, and just emailing, reading, finding stories, and then traveling and going and doing it. And that sort of led to where I am now.
Straightforward, Guy. Sorry, Guy, you make it sound so straightforward. I met the editor at AP and suddenly started taking photos for him. But how did you make all those kind of connections? You make it sound very sort of matter of fact, really. But I wouldn't know how to find the photo editor of AP.
It's a lot. I think it's a lot simpler than people think. I mean, what you do is you Google, if you go onto The Guardian or The Telegraph or any news source, you look at what's happening and you go, okay, I'm going to be in Senegal. What's been published over the last week? And then you look at the photos, and all the photos have a little credit. So you see, all right, if I want to go to Senegal, who's been filing photographs? You go to Getty, just type in Dakar or Senegal, and you see all the photographers that have filed any photos in the last 20 years, if you really want to go all the way back that far. You find those people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and their websites. You find their emails, and then it's just as simple as getting in touch and asking them, hey, let's go for a coffee. So it does take some.
So I guess you've got to be proactive, and
yes, it takes a lot of being very proactive,
confidence, and a bit of
sure.
Yeah.
No, and it's if you just like, oh, how do I find that person? It does seem a little bit like it's quite tricky, but actually, if you just nail down, these photos have to come from somewhere, and especially, I mean, Getty is an incredibly big resource of photos that anyone can just look at. If you go anywhere in the world and you want to get in touch with anyone who's a photographer, you just sort of look there. I mean, I'm constantly using that. There's another one, I can't remember what it's called, and it compiles all of the wire photos from Getty, Reuters, AP, and AFP. And you can just look at everything that's produced all the time, compiled everything. So if I'm going to cover an election, I look at what everyone's photographed that day or the day before and see, oh, okay, this has been happening, that's been happening, what can I do better? And, the idea is to sort of keep informed about the visual stories that are being told, and being able to, I mean, ideally, shoot better photos and find new stories, so then you're not repeating things.
What's the process, guys? So if you're because you're freelance photojournalist, and you've got loads of publications in Washington Post and Financial Times, all and Al Jazeera, and loads of like a really impressive portfolio of work.
Thank you.
What's the process from getting a story? Is it something that you investigate and you decide, I'm going to, let's say, climate change piece, I'm going to go and go to somewhere where I think I can represent that story, and then you're effectively selling those photos to the publications, or do those publications have a project, reach out to you to provide the photography for it?
You chose three good examples of the FT, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and four good examples, and the Washington Post. They sort of all do it slightly differently. And if it depends, I mean, if I find a story, a lot of the time, or at least at the moment, maybe 60 or 70% of my work is assignment based. So I'll get an email from an editor in London or New York or wherever they happen to be. And I'll say, hey, we've got this story, we've got this writer. Are you available next week or in 2 weeks or tomorrow to go to, I don't know, Côte d'Ivoire for 2 weeks? Let me know if that works. Let me know how long it takes to get a visa and X, Y, Z. And you say yes. And then that's done. And so the research bit of that story, which is usually the hardest bit, is done for you, which is quite nice. And then all you need to do is you turn up. All the logistics is mostly figured out. They're paying for a fixer, they're paying for a translator, cars, drivers, everything else is already done. And then you'll meet sometimes you meet the writer in the country that you're going to, or because I'm based in Dakar and there's a lot of journalists there, sometimes they're my friends, a lot of the time they're my friends or people I know. So we'll then travel to the airport together, and then we'll go and spend a week or 2 weeks or however long it is doing that. So that's sort of 60 or 70% of my work now. The rest is me pitching. So I'll be researching, I'm reading newspapers, local newspapers, that are reporting on all sorts of local politics, or it could be there was a flood yesterday, in this town or that town, or and sort of once you start reading a lot, you're sort of connecting dots and trying to find something that's interesting, and that's something that's maybe relevant to a UK audience or an American audience. Or I do a lot of work for a Dutch newspaper, so maybe there's a Dutch program that's just fallen through, and that means that this group of people in this area are not getting some aid or funding, or something like that, something that makes it interesting for that audience. And then I'll reach out to some people, I'll call up some people on the ground, see what the situation is, see if they can maybe host me. And then I'll write a pitch, an email, send it to an editor and see what they say. And if they say, yeah, cool, that's good, find a writer, or maybe I've already got a writer in mind. And it's sort of as simple as that, not as simple as that. But,
so you're trying to,
that's sort of how it works.
So you're typically, so you're trying to balance the amount of sort of at-risk work you're doing before someone, if you get someone on the hook for it.
You need to, you should have a good idea of especially what's actually possible. You shouldn't, pitch a story and say, this is what's happening, even if you know that's what's happening, if you just can't get there. I mean, I think the hardest bit about being a photojournalist or a journalist is access. Access is the key limiting factor to all of this stuff. It's all well and good saying that there's a big story, an amazing story, really interesting one, but if you can't get there, and so you really need to have that pretty much sorted before you send your pitch, because then you can say to an editor, I'm going next week, I've got XYZ lined up, I'm going to talk to these people and this is what's possible, and give them an idea of what it's going to look like. It will be in a jungle, it will be with 100 people at this mining site, or at this or at that. And really, you want an editor to sort of envision what can be created and get them excited. To be like, yes, okay, I want this in my newspaper, I want this in my magazine.
Guy, as somebody with a sales background, as we were saying before we started recording, really, what I find fascinating about what you've just talked about really is the amount of selling you have to do effectively. You kind of, rather than sort of the event happens and you go because somebody's asked you to go there and photograph, you see the opportunity for some photojournalism and then basically sell the idea of you going there and photographing the various.
Absolutely.
As if I got that right. Yeah.
That is absolutely it. I mean, partly it's very expensive for people to send anyone. And that's the biggest thing, right? The other way to get around this is the other thing I do still a lot of work for AFP, Agence France Presse. And they might not send me somewhere, but if I am somewhere, they will use me. So I do this a lot for elections, or if there's been a coup, or if there's been any political thing. If there's an election in Liberia, I will tell the editor in West Africa, look, I'm going to be there. If I am there, can you use me? He goes, yeah, absolutely. We won't fly you there. So find other stories, do other things. But if you come, I'll give you 5 days work or 4 days work, whatever. And sort of, that works quite well. So I'll sort my accreditation and my flights. But once I'm there, and then you're just covering day-to-day activities. That's the more sort of normal photojournalism bit, right? You're just doing, maybe there's a protest or a campaign rally, and that's what people sometimes think of as a photojournalist as well. There's 2 bits of it.
Got you. So looking at the notes we got from you, one of the things it says is that you're hostile environment trained. Now, I photograph a lot of weddings, so that's pretty hostile. But
it's a hostile place. That's so true.
But it's all seriousness. You're obviously in dangerous environments. Places where there's active wars, civil wars, riots, all that kind of stuff. what kind of thing does that mean in terms of the training you have to go through, and
training?
How do you protect yourself?
Yeah, the training is actually more useful than I thought. I mean, a lot of it is first aid and sort of combat first aid. So a lot of it is tourniquets, stopping blood, and resuscitation and stuff like that. And so obviously you learn how to use. I always carry a first aid kit on any of the assignments to more dangerous places. And you're going to be using that, but a lot of it is also planning how you go about preventing you getting into the situations where you will be in danger, right? If you're going to get a driver and you're driving in 10 hours and across a border into a rebel territory, in Sudan, for example, that's what who's your driver, where are you actually going to be going, who's done it before, and what have they said? You get in touch with the people who've done it. When was the last attack? Are they targeting journalists? Are they targeting foreigners? Or you maybe just going to get caught in the crossfire? And it sort of gives you this, and the training just helps you manage that. A lot of it's also just sort of surveilling people, or not surveilling people, but watching, when you're in an environment, keeping an eye on what everyone's reaction is to you being there. If you've got a camera out,
having like a sixth sense almost, that kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. You're just thinking about, a lot of these they're trained by, ex-special forces and everything else. And it is really interesting, once you start thinking about watching what everyone is doing and looking for things that are just abnormal, and most of the time it's absolutely fine, but it does help when it does, get into a sticky situation or something like that. But ideally, if you've done your job right and you've lined everything up, it should be okay. But also know when something is actually, it is too dangerous, or maybe you need a security team, or maybe you need this, or you need that. And that training really helps with that kind of thing. And they do sort of live sort of simulations with actors and stuff like that. It's quite fun, actually. And then they do, kidnapping as well. So there's a whole section on that, and then they'll kidnap you. And
gosh,
wow.
But that's really, but again, like you sort of,
it sounds, Guy, it sounds like it might be quite useful skills for a wedding photographer, an unstable situation.
There should be exactly. It's exactly that.
It's not wedding's fine. It's just a bit of fun.
Wedding's
fine. We should trivialize it. I mean, have you ever been in I mean, don't tell us if you can't tell us the details, but have you ever been in a situation where you felt physically at risk or at harm?
Yes, for sure. I mean, there's lots of times when this is, getting a bit shaky, and maybe you're just, you put yourself at a lot of exposure, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. That doesn't happen too often. Even in places, I've been in South Sudan 5 times in the last year, and that's, it's quite a, maybe a lot of people say unsafe, and it is unsafe sometimes, but it's very random. And so you just try and minimize the randomness of it. What is your plan? Where are you going to go? And it's just things like that. So, but sometimes, it is really random violence. But in protests, I think are the worst. And that could be any country, anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter whether you're in, any country in Africa or in Europe or anywhere, because crowd mentality and people feeling anonymous is really dangerous. And if people just decide very quickly, if you're the only journalist that's there in a crowd of 300 people and everyone's, quite hyped up and the police are sort of shooting and stuff. This happened in Senegal and during pre-election violence, and suddenly, this kid was journalist, and everyone just like turns and just, he really, beat me up, and it was not fun, and sort of close to just run as fast as you can, and then hope that the police aren't going to shoot you on the way out, and then that was probably the closest fun. So I think protests and riots are definitely the most unpredictable and scary things to cover, because you just also never know. I mean, people have weapons, you can't plan everything. No, you can't plan, and you also don't know if I mean, you can go out one day and everyone's like, "Oh, the journalist, great!" You show everyone what's happening, and then the next day you go out and actually, people are like, "Absolutely not! What are you doing?" And they'll very quickly tell you what's what. And then the same with the police. Sometimes the police are fine. Sometimes they're aiming, tear gas things at you and baton rounds at you, and then so really just it switches up so quickly. So you really just have to be like hyper aware of what is happening, and geographically also where you are in this place. I mean, in Dakar, especially before the election, there were protests, multiple days every week for months. and but in lots of random pockets in the city. So knowing where you are and where you're going to, maybe park your car. So then if the crowd comes this way, you can get there, or that way. What are your exits, and who else is around and about? There is a close-knit group of journalists, while covering, and where everyone is mostly, or you try to. But then, maybe they'll cut off the internet, and then they'll cut off the mobile network. So you can't file any photos. You can't let anyone know where you are. And it's sort of all just a bit crazy. So it's all just moving very quickly, and trying to gauge that.
So you must be, I suppose you're continually assessing that risk in real time.
All the time.
Of all those different inputs that you've got. And do you find it, so there must be a level that you think, right, this is now no longer worth the risk, even for the story that might be a fantastic one, that you just bail out and that's your exit strategy?
Yeah, definitely sometimes. I mean, it depends. As soon as it gets dark, out, or before it gets dark. Always leave also before an event ends. There's things like that. It's just like common sense. Just don't be the one guy there that's, while everyone's getting a bit bored and wondering what to do, and you're suddenly there with a few cameras and, you're really just standing out. That's never good. And sometimes you just sort of pull the plug and you're like, but rarely does that happen too often. Or suddenly you're, okay, there's gunshots over there, let's not go over there. But then you can change, maybe the story is about the politics, but then you don't have to be where that fighting is happening, but go and cover, okay, people are getting shot over there, let's cover what's happening, not exactly there, but around that area. So you still stay safe, but you're not exactly where that fighting is. So you distance yourself from it, if that makes sense. So you're sort of changing your idea of what the story can be and what's important all the time. And then maybe you just get a call from an editor or whatever, just say like, get out, don't do that. Let's stay home today and let's do something tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because also, social media, you watch on social media and everything. So, sorry.
So for any listener that I would absolutely recommend going to Guy's website, which is guypeterson.com, looking for his portfolio. There's just
Peterson Guy.
Incredible images there.
Superb images.
Yeah, thank you. PetersonGuy.com. Yeah. Guy Peterson is an architect in America who stole my URL.
Okay. Well,
I've got to be Peterson Guy. Also very interesting.
No, so definitely not a good place to go.
No. If you look through Guy's portfolio on PetersonGuy.com, what really strikes me about them is the each image in just a single frame tells not just a story but quite a complex story. Where you can see an awful lot happening, and you can see the background. You can almost see the progress of that story in that one point in time. Now, to get those sort of images, you have to be pretty close to the action in a lot of them. You're getting right into a situation, and I'm not talking necessarily about the conflict or protests, but more humanitarian stuff, where you're having to be within people, within communities, and situations which aren't particularly, they may be quite sensitive. How do you balance? And by the way, none of the photos look voyeuristic at all. And I'm interested how you avoid that line of capturing something that's going to be a really valuable story to tell versus a more voyeuristic type picture. And how at what point do you say, right, that this is now something that I've overstepped that line?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's something that's very actively in the front of my mind every time you're going anywhere. And you are the outsider and you're coming in maybe to a refugee camp, or maybe just doing any sort of story where you're the outsider. What are the photos going to look like, and how am I going to go about doing it? And you're right, the voyeuristic thing, I think if you look back at photojournalists from the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was definitely a big problem, especially in Africa, of the way that photographers go and take photos. But part of that, I do think there's a stylistic thing about it. I mean, I do see a lot of travel photographers that sort of just try and maybe branch into doing portraits or just taking pictures of anywhere, whether if they happen to be traveling, and it feels voyeuristic. Part of it is the sort of style of it, where it's meant to be sort of highlighting something that's not necessarily the reality. I mean, part of the way that I go about doing that, I'm not changing anything. I'm not trying to, I try not to get too close. I think, when I can't remember who said it, a photojournalist, if you're not close, if your photos aren't good, you're not close enough, along that line. I don't think that's necessarily true. And I think a lot of the time you do need to step back a little bit, because you need to give things context. And I think that's really important in getting that through, right? What else is going on? As soon as you're, if you're taking a photograph of a starving child and it's just there and there's a, that kid on the floor and they look, malnourished or whatever it happens to be, if it's just like that, it doesn't tell you anything. All you're seeing is anyone who is not having a good time. And then that's it. And that actually doesn't help anyone. It doesn't tell the story. And all that photo needs to do to change is add, maybe a child's mother or something happening, something else that's going on, that's interacting, that gives you, okay, this is happening to this person because of this. And this is the effect that it's happening in this context. And maybe how that links to other photos. Because all the time you're thinking of how an individual photo is going to sit in a story, and each one can tell that story further. But I really think context is super important.
That's going right back. And I think that's going back to what you said about the sort of those sorts of images that you're talking about from the 80s, where it would just be a pretty bleak scene. And
Live Aid kind of era.
Yeah, and you're almost... And I guess the other type that I have seen in the past is exactly as you say, Guy, those sort of portrait style that aren't really showing any news. It's just, this is a really interesting looking person, and it's almost a bit poverty tourism a little bit.
It's exactly. It just gives off the wrong vibe.
It's benefiting the photographer rather than anyone that's really looking at it. And I think and your work absolutely masterfully avoids any of that, and that's why I was so keen on it.
Oh, thank you. No, it's a really important. I mean, I think. The whole time I've ever been shooting, it's definitely been a subject to conversation in amongst other photographers as well. And if you do, publish something that's not quite right, if you do, people will call you out on it, which is really good, and because it does need to change. And if it's like, look, this isn't helping, this doesn't change the course of the story, this doesn't add anything. Obviously, this changes. I mean, some people have different lines and where that is, especially if you at some point you still need to be taking the photos of really horrific things. So there's that line. And I guess as a photojournalist, if you're going to be too careful about everything, maybe it's just not the job for you. You do need to be able to do that. And you do need to be not, comfortable with being able to take those photos in those situations. And if you're sort of too squeamish about that, and if you think, and if you want to, I think spending time as well and making sure everyone knows when you're there, that you are there as a photographer and you're going to be taking photos. The consent thing is super important, always.
And almost all genres of photography. For all
exactly.
Genres of photography, I think those soft skills are really important about.
Super
and there's lots of parallels here with street photography where. Yeah, sure, you can be very, very observational and look at shadows and things in street photography, or you can get a bit closer to people. And when you're doing that, something like a smile goes a long way, and sort of just a bit brief chat first and check they're okay. And then it goes into what is more problematic, where it's just a photograph of a homeless person that's not in a great state. And you think, well,
exactly,
did that person consent to that image? And it's a very similar sort of set of parallels.
Yeah, and it just doesn't add anything. I think if there's deliberate also composition, I think it can be lazy sometimes. Those that photography, if you're deliberate in your composition and the way you're going to photograph people in a story, then that also makes it significantly better. If you're just taking pictures without any kind of empathy and time taken to respect the situation that someone is in, then it's not going to go your way, I don't think.
All right. In terms of we normally do a Tech 10 segment in the show, and I thought it'd be useful to sort of just mention that now, because we do have a lot of questions from listener about AI and how it's used, and in particular I was keen on your views on how AI can and should not be used in photojournalism, and what the pros and cons and what the issues around that might be.
Yeah, AI it's an interesting thing. It shouldn't be used in any kind of photojournalism ever. I don't think it should have any place in the creation or editing of photos. I think it's an incredibly dangerous thing. And the issue with, because now Photoshop and Lightroom and everything else, they're coming with these, sort of AI editing things, and they are incredible. Yep. I mean, we start using these, it's crazy what they can do. But the issue is that people already have so little trust in photojournalism and photos from the outset.
Yeah.
And this is just something that people can attack so easily. So I'm really, I think it's a really dangerous thing to start doing. I mean, I've even seen in stock photography that you can, Adobe stock, you can download an image, and if a magazine, they're like, oh, actually, it's not quite right. I want the different background. Or if they just use AI to change the background. It's like, it's no longer, for me, it's just no longer a photograph. And as a photojournalist, what you take is what it should come out as. And it really loses all credibility.
I totally agree. Yeah. I think it's a different thing if Nick and I have got a bride who's got a big spot on her forehead on the wedding day, and we want to take that off. That's one thing. But the kind of photography you do, the authenticity has to be there clearly. Otherwise,
it has to be rock solid. Otherwise, push absolutely anything. Yeah.
Is there things, Guy, that even in camera technology is there areas of camera technology that's helping this, that the validation of a raw image, say?
Yes, I think Leica just released the first one. Maybe 6 months ago, I can't remember which one it was, and that actually has a built-in digital verification code or something like that. I can't remember exactly what you call it. But what it means is that when you publish an image, it can actually, I'm not entirely sure how it works, you can look at the digital record and you can see from point of the file has been taken, the steps that it's been, what programs, if it's gone through Photo Mechanic, Lightroom, and then it's gone up to just being uploaded, and those are the steps. Or maybe it's gone up to some AI thing or whatever else. So you can actually track that, and it's a sort of a digital record. And I think that's the way that camera manufacturers need to tackle this, is digital verification.
Sounds good.
And it shouldn't be, I mean, the way that it sounds, it shouldn't be too hard, right? You can do that. And especially, I think, I mean, anyone following any kind of blockchain, that is exactly what that is. It's a digital verification. And that is the only way to push back on this AI thing. And any time that maybe it's published at a magazine, it's got that little thing saying this is a digitally verified photograph,
almost like a kite mark or a tick mark kind of thing. Yeah,
something like that. It could be anything. I mean, just next to the credit. I don't think it'd be too hard, but it really. I think more camera manufacturers really need to get that out quickly, because it's going to be really important very soon.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly see on Instagram, I'm starting to see it being flagged that there's AI content, so there must be a way that they're picking up this thing from the image itself.
Absolutely.
Certainly in the digital TV domain that I used to work in before photography, then it used to be possible to put in watermarks in the actual video that you can't see with the eye, but you can pick up. And there was loads of examples of like filming, for example, with a phone, film a TV playing a film. And even on that recorded thing on the phone, you could see the watermark, and
flag
the software
it.
could still pick out that watermark.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could even use AI to do that. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Yeah, no, I think there's a slight delay because with your Bluetooth headphones. So just on technology, this isn't a gear podcast, but we should ask the question about what gear do you use? So what cameras are you using? What lenses are you using? And how do you go about processing?
I love gear. I used to spend at uni with a few friends. One of them actually, one of Nick's friends, Kieran, we spent hours and hours and hours talking about gear. So at the moment I shoot on two X Pro 2s and an XT5. I used to shoot Nikon. Okay. And I had a Nikon D4 and an X Pro 1. And I used those, obviously completely different cameras. And the X Pro 1 really helped me get into street photography and just being at home taking pictures of people. People are just so much less intimidating and everything else. The D4 is a real piece. And I sort of transitioned then to get two X Pro 2s when I started to do more professional work. And so then I used those entirely, and I just used the D4 for protests and stuff like that. And then that was stolen last year. So then I was like, okay, well, I need to fully convert to Fuji. So I got a Fuji XT5, and that's now that and an X Pro 2 I travel around with. I always travel with two, and I shoot on 80% of my photos on a 35 f2, and the rest on a 50 f2. And then I always travel
so that's
again
50
with
75 in full frame kind of.
No. So
conversion.
No, that's already converted. So it was a 23 converted, so it's a 35 equivalent. Yeah, exactly. And then I always carry a 28, the equivalent of a 28 f2 and a 70, and that's all I travel with. And then lots of batteries and lots of SD cards. Yeah. Super light, packs down to a tiny little thing. Yeah, I wear two belt pouches, And I never get stopped at security. I never get stopped anywhere. No one bats an eyelid anywhere. And they're amazing. They're brilliant cameras. I shoot a bit of video as well on the X-T5, which is amazing because you can just switch. I don't really like the way it looks, but apart from that, I'm still waiting for the X Pro 4. And then I'll definitely shift to that. Yeah, exactly. But I've been waiting for that for years and years and years. So, and it's super, super simple.
So switching to video leads us on to a question we had from a listener about hybrid shooting and shooting, video and photos together, and what the pros and cons are, what the problems are. And it sounds like you do a bit of that as well. And certainly from my point of view, switching between the two is extremely difficult to get your mind from I want to capture a story in a single photo to I want to set a frame up and let the story play out in front of me. And that chopping and changing is really hard to do. Even the delay from going from a photo mode in a camera to video seems like a minute.
Gets me every time.
Happening,
Absolutely.
So I think, Steve, do you do a bit of that hybrid?
Probably every fourth wedding we're doing now, we're doing video as well. So we're very keen to position ourselves not as videographers, we're photographers that will do some video. So, we don't sell it as anything cinematic or, anything like that. It's very sort of matter of fact video. But our view is we're there, the cameras will shoot good video. Why not, really? So, but you're right. You've almost got to split your brain in half, really. This brain is photo mode and this brain is video mode, because the number of times I end up shooting vertical video by mistake because I saw it as a photo. Then I thought, it's a video. The next thing I know, I'm shooting vertical video, which might be great for Instagram, but that wasn't the idea. And then because with video, most of the problems with video is actually not the video, it's the sound, isn't it? So making sure you get the sound sorted with a backup plan. And on Saturday, we had an outdoor wedding, and there was the groom, the celebrant, but there are also two people giving a reading as well. So I had to make sure I got ways of getting 4 people recorded and captured. I've got wireless goes and things, which did it. But moves on to another question we've got, really. I quite like doing it because it's out of my comfort zone. And if you don't keep challenging yourself in this job, particularly at my age, then kind of what's the point, really? And to me, it's like, okay, well, I can probably shoot this wedding without a lot of difficulty, really. But if I'm going to do video as well, I've really got to push myself, really. And I quite like that.
I know there's quite a few ways that I see photographers that are doing that. Like, for example, the other day I thought I'm just going to shoot on a different focal length as I normally would. Normally my safe thing is a 35mm 7200. If I'm going to go wider, I'm going to go 24 and just stick with an 85. And just see how that feels, and you just start to get a different viewpoint. I know Geraint, that Guy mentioned earlier, who's also my tech go-to for any questions I need answering. He dabbles in film, and that's something that he really likes to do. It doesn't replace.
Yeah, and I really like that he does that. It's cool.
His wedding thing. Yeah, and it's it's something that, because I'm just so busy working as a jobbing photographer all the time, it's something that I have to kind of remember that I am also really passionate about photography, and when you're just in amongst it in a wedding, doing commercial work all the time, you do tend to stay safe because you want to make sure the client gets the images they're expecting, and sometimes just saying, right, hang on, let's put a bit of time aside, let's do something a bit different, and like the flash course you did, Steve, having a different kind of refresher, so when you go into the next situation, think, all right, I'm going to try something a bit different. It can be really enlightening.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Guy, thanks ever so much for coming on the pod. Nick and I normally now have a bit of a chat for the last 15 minutes or so, but you please stay with us and please chip in as you see fit.
Absolutely.
But there are sort of a couple of regular themes that we have in the pod, or we tend to do. It's only the second one we've done. One of which was the techie bit we mentioned. So I guess we've kind of ticked that box, really. We did have another question as well in the Facebook group that we have for the show, which you just called the Photography Pod, surprisingly. And it's always a contentious one for the work that Nick and I do, which is, should wedding photographers get fed?
It's one of the big questions in all of photography. I think, it's the most important question to answer. And
who's saying no to this?
Would say, of course.
Right?
brides and grooms.
I agree. I mean, I've shot a few.
20.
Yeah, I've shot a few weddings, only a few with Geraint as well, and they're great. But you're right. If you don't get fed, it is a really long day to not get fed, and everyone else is sitting there eating, and you're not taking any photos while people are eating. Just get fed. I don't understand.
Here's the photo I took as I collapsed on the floor from lack of sugar. Yeah,
right.
No,
exactly.
All my couples are really good at making sure that, and the venues I work at are great as well. I think once you get to know a venue, they're more than happy to sort you out. I think the where it comes from is, and there is a point here, that almost any other trade or service that you might buy, like a builder or a architect or anything else, wouldn't expect to be fed midway through the service. And so I think that's where it comes from. But then they are not completely immersed in an event like what a photographer is.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, it just makes sense. It's a practical thing, isn't it? That if you have to then bring food or go out and get food, then you're not shooting photos. So
exactly.
There is a bit of a
our view on it is that we don't expect, but we always ask. So we always ask, because you nearly always have a call with them before the wedding, and we always say, just checking, are you planning to feed us, guys? Thank you.
Yeah.
And like 1 in 100 might say no. Oh, okay, then we'll bring something with us. But just be aware that then we'll be eating our food while you're doing something more important or whatever.
And it's just always really embarrassing if a venue happens not to, even most couples, I think, will always be absolutely fine with it, but sometimes a venue might either forget or whatever. And that's just always really awkward, because you've then got to go and ask, and it's like asking someone to buy you a drink. It's just really super embarrassing.
Yeah, and you get the leftovers. You get like we had the other day, which was basically dried chicken and parsnips. That's what we got.
So, Steve, if you got what's this book of the week that you've got for this week?
Okay, so again, with the other things we want to do every show is come up with a book of the week. And again, thanks to people in the Facebook group, we've got some suggestions for future shows. But I'd already prepared one because it's one of my favourite books. I actually heard about this on another podcast a couple of years ago. So there's a guy called Dougie Wallace, who's a Scottish. He's probably not a street photographer. He's urban photographer. Social documentary photographer, whatever you want to call him, really. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't call him a classical street photographer, because he's not the sort of observation. He's very much more the sort of, I'm going to leap out in front of you can go bang with my flash gun. But there's a book that he produced a few years ago now, and it's about Blackpool. So if you're listening to us not in the UK, Blackpool is a northwest seaside town, a traditional UK seaside town. It wouldn't be unkind to say that it's possibly slightly past its best. I love Blackpool because it's a place where you can go and, observe all kinds of life. But it's number one destination in the UK for stag do's, or bachelor parties in America, hen do's, I don't know what they call them in America, and all those kind of things. And he spent a couple of years observing stag do's and hen do's in Blackpool. So that's the book. Now, I don't know what the copyright situation is about showing books on video, so I'm not going to show it for too long, but it's called Stags, Hens and Bunnies. And you just got to go through the pictures and just your jaw just drops open when you look at it. So the first one is a guy cling film to a lamppost, start naked. There's another one where there's a not completely dressed girl trying to eat some sweets from around a guy's equipment, shall we say? I can't even begin to describe it really. I mean, we'll link to because there is a website for his work and for the book. I'll link to it in the show notes. But if you want to observe, I won't say the worst of human life, but what alcohol and high spirits and exuberance can do to younger people when they're having a weekend in Blackpool, it's just a fabulous book. I just love looking through it. Brilliant. Really, and your jaw just drops really. So,
as always, Wallace, thanks for that.
Go on.
Thanks for that, Steve. So as always, my book is a film.
Go on then.
Because I'm determined to turn this feature into book/film club.
Okay.
And I saw The Critic this week with Ian McCallum, which is Ian McCallum about a critic whose name I've completely forgotten. That was just very a real sort of quite a lush but very influential in the. He was a theatre critic
Okay.
So this is like 30s, 40s, I think. But anyway, it was really beautifully shot. And for that reason alone, I just loved it. It's a really beautiful film to just look at. But in the intro to that, one of the trailers was for a film called Lee with Kate Winslet.
Oh, no, I've been hearing a lot about that one.
Yes.
So
I really want to see this.
Plays,
that one as well, Guy. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
It should be great. So Lee Miller was a photojournalist, a female photojournalist in the Second World War. And it seems really fascinating. She's a really excellent photographer. And what I loved about what I'm really looking forward to in terms of this story is that she was more well known later on in her life for being a model for Vogue. And I love the fact that it's focused on her actual skills rather than what she looks like and that kind of thing. So yes, that's going to be a fascinating watch. So I think it's released pretty either imminently or is already out. So that's one to look at. It's just called Lee.
And the first one, The Critic, that's at the cinema, is it then?
Yes. That's it was at our local Everyman in Bristol. So
okay, I'll look out for that one as well.
Well, I'll happily suggest a book. Actually, seeing as I'm here, and actually, and an exhibition altogether. I was in London 2 weeks ago, and there's an amazing retrospective exhibition at the the Imperial War Museum of all of Tim Hetherington's work.
Oh, okay.
He's a brilliant photojournalist. All through the 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, and really, really beautiful work. And this is the biggest collection of his work. Unfortunately, he died in 2014 in Libya, but it's absolutely fantastic. And so I highly recommend it. Anyway, and there's a book also all with his work in. So definitely. I think it finishes.
So that's the Imperial War Museum in London. Yeah.
In London. And absolutely worth it. And it mixes sort of video, and he shot almost everything on medium format film. And it's just stunning. Really, really stunning. Yeah, so highly recommend.
Thanks for and is it obviously so war conflicts, but what sort of wars,
so he was covering the Liberian Civil War, the Sierra Leonean Civil War, but then he spent years afterwards. He spent about 4 years afterwards in Liberia, photographing the recovery of the civilian population after the war. And so he did a lot of teaching, sort of also like a humanitarian. He really did a lot of other stuff. And then he also covered. He had an Oscar-winning film called Restrapo. He spent just over a year embedded with a team in Afghanistan, and this incredible film. But it's all about who these soldiers are and the bond that they make while they're fighting in Afghanistan. So he's really
that's a great film.
It's really, really good, very intense. But he's all about, especially his work in Liberia and Sierra Leone, is the performance of war and what it does to people while they're fighting. And so these photographs, they're just stunning all throughout. And then he covered the Arab Spring and everything else. Really, really beautiful photography. So I highly recommend.
We've got a couple of weekends coming up without any weddings, so I know what I'm going to be doing. I think that sounds right up my street. Thank you for the tip on that one. That
absolutely
fantastic. So
just
a little bit on industry news and what we've been hearing of in terms of new stuff on the horizon. Well, there's a new iPhone. But we won't go into that because that's not really that exciting. But what I did notice, Nick, in terms of new gear, there's this new Sigma lens. Sigma seem to be doing a lot around sort of pushing the envelope in terms of around the standard sort of lens ranges that you get.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got a 24-85 1.8, for example, but they've just brought out a 28-105 f2.8, which sounds quite an interesting zoom range for a wedding photographer.
Quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big lump of glass. But I know a lot of wedding photographers who use the Tamron 35 to 150, but this obviously gives you a bit wider.
And so is that constant 1.8?
Constant 2.8, yeah.
2.8, yeah. 2.8 or 1.8?
2.8. No, the 1.8 is 24-85.
Okay.
24. It might even be less than that. It might even be 24 to 55 or something like that. It's quite a giant zoom range. Yeah.
A giant piece of glass.
Exactly.
It must be.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So it's definitely 28-105 f2.8. So I could see myself using that at a wedding, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it is that the kind of holy grail one lens thing, isn't it? You take one lens to a wedding, and certainly for film, I think that's all you would need for film, isn't it? Because you're not going to be going out of 1.4 for a film anyway, unlikely for a wedding.
No, exactly.
I tell you what.
Go on.
My new piece of gear on the subject of gear, I just picked up a new. It's almost a toy camera, and it's a looks like a film camera body, like a disposable film camera, but it's actually digital. So there's no focus, there's no nothing else, and there's no screen, and so you just take pictures. It has a little click and everything else, and then you plug it into the laptop and download your photos. It either does color or black and white, and they're little files. They're like 8 megapixels, but I love it. It's brilliant. You just don't need to worry about anything. This is by a company called Camp Snap, I think. But I did have a little speaker, and yeah, it's brilliant. And they were originally made for kids to go to, I think, like summer camp or something. Anyway, but it does have a little speaker that makes an annoying sound. So if you just take off the back and snip the wires, and then it stops making a sound. And then if you sand off the logo, then it's a very discreet. But they look brilliant. So I highly recommend. That was like, I found it just a few weeks ago. It's great. And just slip it into your pocket. Okay. The battery lasts forever.
How much was that, Guy?
I think £60 maybe. It was from the US actually, so maybe it was even £50, but then £25 postage just because it was coming from the States. But yeah, my big summer find.
Disposable camera.
Disposable digital camera. Yeah.
Yeah. In an environmentally friendly way, of course. Yeah,
exactly.
I think we've covered all the topics we plan to do today, Nick. I think.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's been absolutely fascinating, Guy. Thank you for joining us. And,
thank you so much for having me.
No, you're welcome. And to the listener, thanks so much for joining us today and for all of the downloads of the first episode. Keep subscribing, and if you are on Apple in particular, if you can leave a review, that's really, really appreciated. Just it means that just so many more people can hear about the podcast. Next week we are
2 weeks time. Not
2 weeks time. 2 weeks. Yeah, next episode. Although it is next week, so we're recording next week.
True.
That's where my mind was. So next episode we will be speaking to Steve Gerrard, who is a music photographer and has worked with the likes of Amy Winehouse and Pearl Jam and loves Alan Partridge. And I promised Steve that we won't talk about just Pearl Jam and Alan Partridge, which is pretty much my two favourite things.
Well, no,
so
that's good to me.
I avoid doing that. Yeah, but thanks very much for joining, everyone, and we look forward to catching up with you next time.
Talk to you soon, folks.